hard game against a Saints side looking really competitive, absolutely chuffed, great D and passion from a Salford who looked knackered in the first 20. Thought we missed out, and I'm still not optimistic for the season, but I really enjoyed that.
Can't beat great D. Aidan Stalker got in touch with us. He said, a big pile of poo, Farge going off obviously caused our attack to be disjointed, but these things happen in rugby league, so we should be able to organise ourselves a lot better than that. Percival, Lomax and Walmsley were good, I suppose. Nobody else, I'm afraid. Salford looked good defensively, but hard to judge against our piss-poor attack. Someone post a stamp on Morgan and send him back to Australia.
Yet similar critical stuff from Frogmore. It says, that was a tough loss. Losing Farge in the first minute wasn't ideal, but the rest of the team felt like they went off too then. Abysmal attacking options in the first half and marginally better in the second. Without looking at the stats, I felt like Percival, Makinson, Roby and Big Al were all the standouts. Also, how far off is Wilkin from retiring? I'm asking for a friend. P.S. Fair play to Salford, you AIDS harbouring thundercunts.
Very good. I like that. Helen Hughes got in touch. Thought Salford were going to lose it a few times tonight, but they held on with some decent goal line defence and made wise calls in taking the 2 for the penalties. As an aside, I'm pretty chuffed with my Subaru prediction being spot on for this match at least. Watching Louis Sinbinning got me thinking though, are there any brackets free stats on which side does better during the 10 minutes of Sinbinning in Super League matches? It seems to me that the side who has lost the player often score more during this period, or at least they are not disadvantaged by the sin binning from a points point of view. What do you reckon?
Well, in this sin binning period it was 6-4, weren't it, to Salford, but like that was under a sort of desperation cloud, I suppose, and Ryan Morgan with an epic fuck-up. But I don't. It's not like something I can just dial up and get, but it's something I can backtrack over at some point in the duration of the season, because I have enough to go off.
Yeah.
But I don't have enough to just press a button and get this. But I would suggest, and I will do the analysis at some point for Helen, because it's piqued my interest, a question. But I would suggest that it's not what we expect, because I think you have a significance bias. You notice when a team does badly in the 10 minutes more than you notice when a team does well and scores 2 or 3 tries.
Okay.
I would suspect.
Right.
I would reckon there'll be a small advantage for the team with the extra man, but maybe not a massive, overwhelming advantage. But certainly, I would guess we remember more the occasions where, or it stands out to us more, the occasions where the team does well with 12 men, rather than the team doing, rather than
doing what's expected.
What's expected,
which is for the team with 13 players to score points galore. There you go. So Brian Davies got in touch with us.
Really good performance from Salford. Toughed it out when it got hard. Gave away lots of silly penalties early on, but then got sorted. Saints had their moments, but the loss of Theo early on was crucial. Matty Smith's kicking was pretty ordinary, as the Aussies say. Great to see Salford finally come good. Hard not to wish them well now the Dockers shut up.
Well, that is something that goes hand in hand with Salford's resurgence this year. Or surgeons.
Yeah.
There really needed to be a resurgence, did it? The Doctor is sort of taking more of a back seat, and I think that can only be a good thing.
I meant to point this out.
Like him as a character, but it shows when you keep him out of the headlines and he's not the comedy caricature villain, and they allow the rugby club to be run properly, and he allows people to take control of that for him, look at what results are being yielded.
And he's doing more sensible sort of interviews, is not being as...
Although to be fair, today he did call for the cap to be increased again, so he's still got it in him.
I think he was directly asked a question about that though, and I think it will be passed on Wednesday's meeting, that either a second marquee player allowance, a change in how the marquee allowance works, or an increase in the salary cap. I think all those things are definitely on the board. I think they'll lean more towards changing the exemptions a little bit to allow clubs, if they can meet criteria, to spend a little bit more, but not making it so much that it's detrimental to the clubs who aren't in that position yet. It gives them a pathway to reach that position. But I think the marquee thing will change.
There you go.
I meant to say after Owen's early doors about he's kind of right in a way to not get too carried away, because wasn't it at this time
a couple of seasons ago, wasn't it?
last year? Well, they were in the top 4 at Easter when they beat Wigan at the AJ Bell. Was that last season?
That was last season.
Was that last season?
I don't recall them being that high up the league.
Yeah, and everyone was getting excited and stuff.
I think it was overshadowed somewhat by Widnes, wasn't it, at that point?
Yeah.
That's why I don't remember it quite so clearly. Maybe Widnes was like
But this sort of thing has happened, so I think it's right to have an element of caution and realism to it.
Yeah.
But top 8 should be happening for this Salford side, the way that they've organised themselves. And we talked about the stability off the field and stuff.
Yeah, Dan, something that I brought up on my spot when I was on TalkSport.
There you go.
Right, Dan Hull got in touch. He said, another good win for Salford. Things looking up as a whole for the club. Saints started strongly, but in a close first half. Our defence was on top form, and we nicked a try before the break. Another close half in the second, and I really thought we'd lost it when Louis got sin-binned, but we showed grit and held on. 3 on the bounce. If we were Cast fans, we'd be talking about the title now, brackets, in March. We've got to get to the top 8.
Scoots 28 Max said, a very entertaining match which Salford seemed fully in control of, even when Saints had more possession. Can't believe Saints had the cheek to complain about Gleeson being on the pitch too much when they are renowned for always having the trainer on.
That is very true. There's a certain irony to that one. St. David got in touch. He said 2 steps forward, 3 back. Credit to Salford, who were quicker in the ruck, better organised and incisive. The loss of Farge sent Saints into a terminal tailspin despite the presence of senior half Matty Smith. On the right side is desperately poor, and the pack bar Walmsley and Roby is underwhelming. Owens, Peru and Lee add nothing. Saints won't challenge until Cunningham departs and the championship quality players go too.
Paul Mac _78 says, Salford looking the goods. Gonna call it now, they will make the semis. Carney and the wife beating cunt had some nice touches, but the Red Devils pack were aggressive and that's why they won the day. Also, think Logan Tompkins is coming along nicely.
Yeah, he does a work-a-day job for them, doesn't he? I don't think he's not particularly dynamic in what he does, Logan Tompkins, but he's a vital pivot, isn't he?
He's not flash, but he plays to the structure that's been outlined, which is to give, the creative axis behind him. You've got a creative player at full-back. You've got the 3 halves that they've got on board.
They've got ball handlers all over the park. Like Flanagan's ball handling's exceptional for a forward as well, isn't it? So there's players everywhere that can do a job for them. So no, I like that.
So I think that's why that's the structure where you don't have the dynamo in at hooker necessarily.
Tim G Radio, great commitment all round from Salford, especially the commitment from Salford fans to come dressed as a seat day. Oh dear, Tim.
Peter J. Thomas, at Mr. Peter J. Thomas.
Excellent. This is like the most formal person we've ever had get in touch, isn't it? J.R. Hartley.
Thanks for getting in touch,
Pete. Cheers, Pete.
Great win for Salford Devils and thoroughly deserved. Defence was sublime and a real big effort across the 17.
Fantastic. Mark Hogan says a massive 2 points. Was up for work at 3 a.m. Friday morning, so the win made up for being half dead driving up the M6. I thought our defence was outstanding. Todd Carney makes a hell of a difference when he comes on, but hats off to Dobbo. Awesome again. Got a headache from getting that stressed out with the ref. Bet the whistle was pissed off amount of times it got blown. On to Hull, fingers crossed for another 2 points.
And we finish with Paul Ludo Lewis. He says, if Kieran Cunningham keeps taking Saints on this downward spiral, they'll be moving his statue outside the DW instead.
Oh, God, good work. You can always rely on Paul Ludo to give me a little chuckle.
We'd never get that. I don't think we could cope with the disgusting nature of it.
I don't suspect it's actually going to happen, Mark. But let's talk. Cunningham is on board.
No, but even the very mention it sends a shudder. Of even like the hypothetical joke of it all.
I'm sure I've cracked this joke before, but when they sack Kieran Cunningham or when he steps down in the next 4 to 5 months, which I expect fully will be the case, I want them to stage some kind of Saddam Hussein statuesque pulling down of the statue. Maybe get a load of some local lads with citron saxos and tie a bit of rope round them and get them to pull it over. Just something ceremonial.
I'd like them to just pretend his whole coaching tenure didn't happen, and instead bring him out for the half-time draw or something at the very next home game after he gets canned off. It's returning to the totally wicked stadium, one of St. Helens' greatest legendary players, and pretend that he'd not been involved.
I have a theory that it's actually Sean Long who's in charge, but nobody could cope with the idea of Loggy being put in charge of anything beyond the kettle, so they've had to have Kieran Cunningham be like the front for it, but Longy's making all the decisions behind the scenes.
Well, wasn't that the entire noughties at St. Helens?
Just has to be the front for it, like, oh,
that was 1997 to 2007.
No, Sean, I don't want to do that. You do as you're told. Anyway, so what did you make of this one?
Do you know what? I slipped into almost becoming a Salford fan for the night. I was getting that wound up with the constant feeling that every 50-50 call was going to St. Helens to really help them get back into the game. But it was excuse to say it never really felt like Salford would lose control, even though they never really felt like they were dominant in a weird way.
Saints just offered so little and made so many stupid errors. I mean, one particularly that stands out from Morgan, but I was disappointed in St Helens more than impressed by Salford in some respects, because they'd kind of abandoned this. They were starting to look better, weren't they?
Yeah.
The last couple of weeks, and it just all fell out of the window.
Well, it was. A Kea player got injured early on, and I always do say in-game injuries are significant when you compare them to players being missing from the starting lineups.
Yeah, of course.
But in the first minute, you had a player like Tommy Lee who's played in the pivot positions who you could have brought on. You've got Lomax who they eventually played in there, and you've got Wilkin who always gets put in there. So you've got players who you should have been able to shuffle a lot quicker than Saints were able to fathom this out. And when they did fathom it out, the decision was to restrict Johnny Lomax, their most dynamic attacking weapon, to, in terms of ball playing anyway, to one side of the pitch, which, okay, you've got him getting the ball through Tyre and Percival's an absolute machine this year, and what a brilliant player he is, and we both rate Lomax highly, and that sort of stuff, but it just took them too long to figure that's the way they wanted to go with it, and I didn't think that was necessarily the best option anyway. So you ended up with who was really supporting Matty Smith, who I think really tried his best to get everywhere and get involved as much as he could. You saw him popping up across the backline trying to organise things, but it was just no one wanted to be organised, it felt like at times, which meant they never got the sort of big sweeps that they've been putting on to try and throw teams out of their defensive structures. Never really got going. They never really established a kicking game, because they didn't really ever again establish who was first and second receivers throughout the whole game. So that was poor from their point of view. Obviously Alex Walmsley was fantastic. James Roby did what James Roby normally does. He had a few occasions where penalties weren't given against him. He won a couple of penalties that, other players might be more criticised in those circumstances. I think the ones he won were fair. I don't think he tried to win unnecessarily. I think Lee Mossop didn't try to move at all, and he was right in his way. And the Murdoch Masilla one, he tried to go the other way, but nothing was on, and so the ref rightly blew that a player was out. But he did, he did his typical hand on the ball that he never gets penalised for, a little pull of the leg that he never gets penalised for that other players do. He's very crafty at that. But he did all his good stuff too. But all those sorts of things rolled into, I don't know, Salford had the right attitude in this one. You were saying you weren't that impressed with Salford, you were more disappointed with St Helens. I think it was almost the other way around. I was so impressed with Salford's resilience, defensive fortitude, reaction to some of the penalties that I thought were questionable that went against them, and some of the decisions that they didn't get themselves. And really, they made the right game management decisions at the right time. They went for two at the right time. They faced their own injury problems. Chris Brining never returned in the second half. Logan Tompkins went off for a head knock for a period. They had Flash Flanagan come off after 2 minutes on the bench to recover from his million tackles, running back, chasing everyone effort. And he only had a little bit of rest before he had to go in and touch every ball on every play. Hooker, not his normal position. And Greg Johnson didn't come back on after the 25th or so minute, or 30th minute, or whenever it was, when he went off with his facial head injury. And Chris Wellen played out of position on the wing and did a really, really strong job. I think Salford showed great attitude, and I was really impressed with that.
Okay. I think my expectations of Salford are high enough that that's kind of what I want them to do anyway. Whereas St Helens were improving, and I was disappointed that it had dropped off. Was probably what I was.
Fair enough, yeah.
Probably what I was more getting at in terms. I don't want to take anything away from myself because at times they play some cracking rugby league.
A couple of great tries.
Very exciting to watch at times in terms of the players that they're able to put on the park at the moment, aren't they?
Dobson's first try and the Saints